There you go.
Great. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in today for our panel discussion. I am Shalini Prem. I am the president of the Final Stand, and with me is Shrishti, who is the outreach manager at GPODS, which is the Global Policy, Diplomacy, and Sustainability. So today we have with us a very esteemed panel that we are very lucky to have because of their diverse backgrounds, which Shrishti will also be elaborating upon. But as you all know, this panel discussion has been organized by the Final Stand in partnership with GPODS. So before we begin, we just like to give you a little background on what our two organizations do. So the Final Stand, or TFS, is, as a lot of you might know because you go to Jindal, I would say, is a student-run climate change advocacy, policy, and law initiative. And it is under the tutelage of Justice Michael D. Wilson, based out of the Hawaii Supreme Court. So the focus of TFS is majorly to improve climate literacy, but also our long-term goal has been to develop a draft climate change legislation, which we can then sort of use to influence the legislation or policy making that the government does. Right, so that's pretty much in a nutshell what the Final Stand does. We are very passionate. We have a very passionate group of students who dedicate weekly, like hours every week, to fight towards something that is so crucial to our survival. Right, so just handing it over to Shrishti, who will now talk a bit about GPODS as well.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shrishti, and I welcome you all to what we hope would be a very fascinating panel discussion. I congratulate the team of the Final Stand and GPODS on making this happen, and I thank them for their cooperation throughout. This panel discussion is basically an attempt to bring about a dialogue on some very crucial aspects that were presented at the COP26 and to bring a deeper understanding of it. The Global Policy, Diplomacy, and Sustainability Fellowship is one such voice in this movement to engage students and professionals to learn about varied nuances at the intersection of policymaking, international diplomacy, and sustainability, and to also act as a launchpad in their careers. Applications for the spring cohort are currently open, and we would encourage you to check out our website and apply before its deadline, which is next week, 15th of January. I also have the honor of introducing a stellar panel of experts for today's panel discussion. We have with us Ms. Gayatri Raghva, who is an environment education consultant at United Nations Environment Program, India office, and has massive experience in the education sector. Dr. Vivek Saxena, who is an Indian Forest Officer and the Managing Director at the Haryana Forest Development Corporation, Panchkula, and is the former country representative at International Union for Conservation of Nature. Ms. Jasmine Mehta, who chairs the Indian Women in International Relations Network. She's also a fellow at Global Policy Insights and a mentor at the GPODS Fellowship. And in the corporate world, is responsible for developing the ESG corporate sales in Europe, Middle East, and Africa regions at MSCIE. Mr. Ishan Chaturvedi, an environment and energy lawyer, faculty member at the Jindal School for Environment and Sustainability, and also the founder of an environmental consultancy firm named NVPOL. We thank you all for your time today, and we welcome you all to this panel discussion. In order to give a brief overview of today's discussion, I'm going to hand it back to Shalini. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Shrishti. So as you all know, today's session is titled COP, Scope, Workings, and Challenges. So before we begin, we just wanted to sort of share what the intention behind having this panel discussion was and why it was important for us to have this discussion with such a diverse group of individuals, right? Because as you all know, the Conference of Parties, or COP, is a decision-making forum by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or simply known as the UNFCCC. So the main idea behind this panel discussion is to bring about an understanding on the conversations that take place at the COP and the manner in which they affect our daily lives at the ground. we're going to attempt to understand and try to answer questions regarding how relevant are these negotiations and commitments that take place at these global levels to us at an individual or sector-based level, individual level across sectors, and who should really be accountable or held accountable for these negotiations, decisions, and commitments that are again made at a global level. So before we begin, we would like to go over some house rules and house rules regarding the Q&A and how we would be taking up your questions. So you are always free to drop in your questions in the chat box, and we will be taking note of it. And we have a dedicated Q&A session at the end. We've dedicated about like 20-30 minutes for the Q&A session, where we will take up these questions and put them to our panelists. You may feel free to ask specific questions directed to any of these panelists, or even generic ones, which will then open up to the panelists for their answers. Right? So yeah, with that, let's get this session started. Ms. Jasmine, if we could begin with you. Hi. Hello, Ms. Jasmine. How are you?
Hi. Hi, Shalini. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's of course a real pleasure to be talking to some of you again today. Yeah, I think it's a great foundational session to really just talk about COP and also kind of identify the implications of the decisions made at COP at the very ground level and to citizens of the world. I think this year I did have the pleasure to be part of in Glasgow, given I'm based out of London. Of course, in the capacity of the private sector, not quite representative of the government of India. But that being said, I think COP in itself, I'm quite a fan of it, and all of the regime structures that have been built, pretty much in the space of globalization. And so I think to really kind of kick off the conversation. I think there've been mixed reviews about COP26, and I still, am of the firm belief that COP26 did make some remarkable progress, especially in areas of completion of the Paris Agreement rulebook and what that has to cover in the area around deforestation. Of course, my co-panelist, Dr. Vivek Saxena, would be in best place to talk about deforestation and what that means for India. And then I think, kind of moving on, there has been, a more of inclusiveness displayed by COP when, considering non-state actors as having voices, maybe not at the table, but, in separate consultations. And beyond that, the remit of finance, something that I do work within the private sector capacity, and just the fact that there has been commitment from the private finance segment in terms of course, not saying that they're being socialist, they're being absolute capitalist, but nevertheless, as long as it, fuels the need for, filling in the gap around funding for developing and LDCs here. So yeah, I think that's my initial comment here, but I'd be quite keen to hear from my colleagues here.
Yes, thank you so much, Ms. Jasmine. We would actually like to throw it over to Mr. Vivek, who would be able to sort of shed his unique perspective and reflections on how COP affects even like about COP26 and its impact on the forest as well, if you could.
Yeah, thank you, Shalini. At the outset, let me congratulate Ishan and entire team for organizing this very interesting discussion. And really happy to see the wider participation from the participants. And you know that the COP26, every year we wait for the COP. And we have a lot of expectations. And we wait for what are the outcomes. Outcomes is based on a lot of deliberations and discussions. And the real challenge lies with whatever we discuss, whatever we agree to commit, how much we are able to achieve. So that tracking of the various objectives and targets, so that basically when we talk about the climate change, the global objective is to reduce the, you can say, temperature rise by 1.5 degrees centigrade, and through various measures. Afforestation certainly is one of the important component. Apart from that, other measures related to the, you can say, mitigation measures as well as adaptation measures. Because climate change is real, and with the uncertainty due to climate change, maybe the frequent weather events, then change in rainfall pattern, and these all are causing a lot of issues because of the rise in temperature. There is a threat of livelihoods and also the migration from the coastal areas. Similarly, agriculture production is also likely to be affected. So these are all the challenges, and different countries, they have submitted their nationally determined contributions also to the UNFCCC. And based on nationally determined contributions, still, if we sum up all those, the revised plan has also been submitted by about 151 countries. Still, if we take into account their commitments, so we'll be ending up about 2.5 degrees centigrade. But the thing is, one of the important things from which we take a little, you can say, respite, then after the Paris Agreement and when those commitments were made, so those summing up was leading us to the very worst scenario of 4 degrees centigrade rise. Now, the present level of commitments will lead to a rise of around 2.5 degrees centigrade. And what we have committed that we have to restrict it to 1.5 degrees centigrade. So with all these measures, each and every sector has to play a very, very important role. Now, coming to the afforestation thing, India has also committed that as per our nationally determined contributions, that we will have additional carbon sequestration of about 2.5 to 3 billion tons that will be in addition to what is the present scenario. And for which some of the initiatives which India has already taken, they have under one of the action plan on the National Climate Change Action Plan, one is the Green India Mission. Apart from that, under the Bond Challenge commitment, because Bond Challenge related to the afforestation is the global pledge. It's some sort of a thing, which was launched in partnership with the government, Federal Republic of Germany and International Union of Conservation of Nature and also WRI. Coming to the scenario that as per the global map, more than 2 billion hectares of our land is under various type of degradation. Then they come out with the global pledge that they will have 150 million hectares to be brought under the forest landscape restoration by 2020, and additional by 2030, 350 million hectares. And if you see the scenario from the India committed this commitment of about 21 million hectares to be brought under forest landscape restoration by 2030, out of which 13 million hectares by 2020 and additional 8 million hectares by 2030. Again, another important Rio Convention, that is UN Convention to Combat Desertification, that COP was convened in India in September 2019, where Indian Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji that enhanced India's pledge to by 5 million hectares. So that total 26 million hectares to be brought under restoration initiatives by 2030 by India. And this pledge of 26 million hectares is the largest pledge by any country globally, because that is reflected on the Bond Challenge Barometer, in which whatever has been your pledge and whatever has been your achievement, that is all reflected there. And if you come to the afforestation part, India is the correct path as of now. And that is also a very remarkable achievement, given the scenario that the type of pressure we have a demographic pressures related to the population, the livestock and all. In spite of that, India, as per the Forest Survey of India report also, India has been able to sustain at least its forest cover. Otherwise, you can say for any development activity, we look towards the area, the vacant land, and what is the land when we use all other land resources. We look toward the forest land, and always with the justification that development is very important. Then each and everyone has to play a very important role to have a tree. Another concept regarding which has been recently launched, that the 330, 300, that if from every household, you should be able to see at least 3 trees. Similarly, then accordingly, you should have at least 300 meters minimum distance where you can have some public space where you can find the green space. So these are all the new jargons. We take a lot of afforestation program, and India also supported that enhanced pledge into maybe the renewable energy, maybe the afforestation targets, and these are the initiatives. So these can be some of the initiatives related to the, you can say that regarding the afforestation method, and which is very important given the scenario of this pandemic scenario. Again, we are facing the present wave of Omicron and the figures which we see on the TV that really shakes each and every one, because we were thinking now that is nearly we are coming to the right path, and again suddenly you can see that what is happening now. And the root cause of such type of potential pandemic things is always also rooted in our linkages of humans with the nature, because surrounding nature and nature process we have disturbed. And one of the root cause which is also alleged to with the present pandemic is somehow, you can say, illegal wildlife wet market or like that, apart from the other controversial issues that whether it was lab made or even if it is that, even then you can see that most of this pandemic have been the zoonotic origin, which has caused somewhere because we have been in touch with the natural habitat of the various wildlife species at the global level. When each and every species has been given an important role, it is not the human being which is only important, because the planet Earth has to sustain all the species, and for planet every species has an important role, and their various linkages are there. And we as a human beings, we are the biggest culprit by disturbing this balance and equilibrium. And that's why when we disturb this wildlife habitat or ecosystem services, then certainly the ecosystem services are deprived, and this can lead to such a scenario. And to minimize such type of scenario, one of the things can be, you have to protect the forest, you have to improve the forest cover, you have to improve the quality of the forest. So these are some initial thoughts related to afforestation. And I think globally, whatever we talk, whatever we pledge, if we really realize into the action, that will be the biggest achievement for every year. Otherwise, every year COP comes and we wait for the next COP with a lot of things. The thing is, after the COP, we ensure that everyone fulfills those commitments through the right measures.
Thank you so much, sir. You gave us quite some point to talk on, and I'm sure we'll get back to that soon as well. But before, I would like to actually ask Ms. Gayatri, as an education consultant, especially in another United Nations institution and organization, what are your reflections and perspectives on the outcomes of COP26, especially probably in terms of the education sector as well?
Good evening or good afternoon to all of you. And what can I say? At this point in time, in fact, when Ishan told me you have to talk about COP, this time I was totally involved with whatever was happening in India with COVID, with 100 different things. So then I called up my friend who works with the Center for Environment Education, and I asked her, because she happened to be at the COP. And so I asked her, hey, how was it like? And she's pretty young, not like me. I'm a senior citizen. So then she says, you won't believe it, ma'am. This is the first time we've had far more youth than ever before. She says, the youth voice is becoming louder and louder. And by the way, her name is also Shrishti. I was telling the other Shrishti. So she was telling me that the sound is becoming louder. And then there was so much of youth representation. And I think youth have come to a point where they do not want to take a lying down anymore, right? So they are up. We can make all the governments, all the bodies, everybody can make 100 different pledges and 100 different targets and everything. But now I think youth are on their path. They're going to see to it that people are doing what they're saying that they will do. Because from what I hear at the COP in Glasgow this time, the sound was so much. And I remember the first time, you remember the first 2007 when the UNFCCC came up with the whole scenario of global warming, I happened to be at the UNFCCC meet. I was not a youth, but I was there at that meeting. And we were trying to push in the Article 6 at that point in time, which was to do with capacity building, education, etc., to talk about it. And there we were talking till our faces became blue that, education has to be given importance. You can't, okay, fine. Just to, I guess, to satisfy everybody, they put in that education and capacity building. Capacity building at a professional level happens, but at a youth level, I wanted to know how much of investment have been made, how much of support has been given to the youth to basically, raise their scale up in terms of climate change education or anything. So every COP, as Mr. Saxena very clearly said, we come, we talk, we go. So every time we've been pushing this education bit, but apparently this time in COP26, they got the education its right place. They said that every nation, every country should have a national youth forum. They should organize about 2 or 3 national youth forum. Well, at least they're getting somewhere. I would definitely want far more than this. This is just small little bit for me. I would definitely want far more for the youth, because youth, one, forms the largest population in the world. They are the ones who are going to be facing the whole brunt of the climate change when it actually happens. We are not discussing whether climate change is happening or not. It is already happening. And I think we all know that. I think yesterday night, when you woke up to that huge thunder, which was rolling, right at the top of our head in Delhi, you were wondering, is this a monsoon rain or is this the winter rain? Or what kind of a rain is there? So we are these days, and I was in Himachal just during the summer season, when the land next to my own house in the village just slid down because of that, the slides that were happening. So I don't think we need to be arguing whether climate change is happening, when will it happen? The issue is, when is it going to get worse, right? And maybe not in my lifetime, because I don't think I have very many years left, but in your lifetime for 100%, it is going to happen if we don't do something about it soon. And I think youth have got it. Youth have got it, and they're raising their voices now. And they're not going to take no for an answer, and they're going to do something really strong. And I believe, as a part of UN, we've been working with various bodies. I've been writing to every single, I wish I knew to write to you, Ishan. We were writing, we had that Action for Climate Empowerment, which is, where we are putting in how much work has been done on capacity building, empowerment, education, etc. So as writing to every organization asking, what have you done? What have you done? This is all before COP26, so that I could gather the information. We could prepare a nice, beautiful, laid out, nice design stuff, and then show, what, so much has been done, kind of a thing. So when I was going down, it was a humongous task trying to get people to say, what have they actually done for climate empowerment, for education? There are a lot of organizations which have been putting wonderful, wonderful efforts. And as I said, Center for Environment Education is one. They have recently started a course. I think I will send the link to Ishan, or maybe I will send it on the chat screen. This is a course for youth where you're getting all on climate education, advocacy, policy, etc. So they're running a nice little, very beautiful course as well. So I can send out that course to you. And there are reports now which are coming out, which very clearly show this is on one hand. And to put a little bit of a, negative sound onto the whole thing, is recently, just before COP, there was this huge study that was conducted among youth to know about what is happening and what do they think what is happening to the world, and what are their views about climate change, etc. I think this was done by Bath University. And at that point in time, very clearly, including India, many countries were interviewed. Most of the youth were so concerned. Many of them were very worried. And I have one word to say to youth. The scenario is not great, but you know what? Despair is not going to do anything. If you get into that despair mood, and if you go into that, what is going to happen, what is going to happen kind of a thing, nothing will happen. For action, you need to have hope. And my hope is your spirit, is the youth spirit. That is where the hope lies for me, because I think you people should take to task everybody who says they will do XXX, whether be it the industry or a government or anybody, that they will do these things, set up a beautiful target and everything, but then at the end of the day, do they achieve it or not? I think you need to be keeping track. I think you need to be our teachers now, from now on. So this is my take on what youth can do. And I think COP26 was one of the most successful one in terms of youth representation, youth coming together, and the sound of youth that was coming out. Youngo, YOUNGO, which is a youth and children organization set up as a part of UNFCCC for hearing the voices of youth or giving their this thing. Youngo also came across, and then I think there's a lot of sound being made. But I think we need to move beyond sound. We need to move beyond sound. We need to move beyond flag raising or whatever it is. We need to really act wherever you are. Act in your university, act in your community, act in wherever you are. If you don't do that, then we're just exploiting the situation. Okay, fine, I get a little bit of time to talk about something really, which is a great talk these days and the hot topic these days. So I get to talk. That's not where it should end. We need to move to action, and action very fast. Otherwise, I don't think we'll be able to meet up with the kind of targets we need to meet up with.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gayatri, for that very inspiring, I would say, answer. And with that, if you could also move on to Professor Ishan about you as an academician, have obviously having researched extensively on environment and policy. How do you weigh the whole situation that took place at COP? What are your perspectives and reflections on this?
So first of all, let me start by thanking GPODS and the Final Stand, and Shalini, Srishti, with everyone who's behind organizing such a wonderful platform to speak. Also, thank you for putting me behind Jasmine, Dr. Saxena, and Gayatri, because that's made my job a lot easier to discuss what I wish to discuss. Before I go on to discuss what Shalini asked me to, I want to address all the students in the audience, and I want to make a confession. So we do this a lot. We speak on public platforms, and we have already posted about the GPODS fellowship, so on and so forth. And whenever we talk about climate action, one of my personal conundrums is, it is, a doomsday scenario, and we have to fight for our lives, and the next generation, as Gayatri said, has to fight for its survival and its rights and its inheritance and everything. But it is a doomsday scenario, right? It is a pessimistic view of, if we don't do this, it's the end of the world for us. So what I wanted to confess to all of you is that my personal New Year resolution, Happy New Year to you all, by the way, has been that I am not going to be pessimistic about this in any of my public talks anymore. If any of you are in my class, you know that I can be pessimistic about how we are heading, but at least in the public lectures, I'm going to be optimistic about this. So that being said, first, I want to acquaint all of you with a basic fact of life. And sometimes when we're young, we do not appreciate, I'm not that old, guys, but I sound old, but when we're young, we think that this is it, this is what we need to do. And that's the right rigor to have, and that's the right outlook to have. But the fact of the matter is that every generation, every human generation has the greatest challenge of its own times, right? So at one point in time, it was the Black Plague. At another time, there was the World War, and at another time, there was separation of powers, and at another time, there was the Cold War, and at another time, there was what was happening in Berlin and the Cold War ending and unipolarity and so on and so forth. So every generation has its own challenge, the greatest challenge, what we perceive to be. Now, for good or for bad, that challenge has seldom, the flip side of not allowing to overcome that challenge has meant ending the species. Now, that's the sad bit, that our greatest challenge and your greatest challenge has been fighting climate change, coming up with climate action, mitigation, adaptation. But these are big words. Even at the local level, doing something about climate change is your greatest challenge. And you guys have the highest responsibility, because with you do not get second chances. You cannot say that, in the 21st century we failed, but let's try again in the 22nd century. That's not going to happen. In the 22nd century, it's probably going to be, you're going to be starting from fish and sea and evolution all over again or something. I don't know. So that's also flip side to it, but take respite in the fact that this is your generation's greatest challenge. To give you a background of why COP and what COP and how COP, let me give you a couple of numbers. So 600 million years back, the average temperature of our planet was 290 degrees Celsius, right? Today, the average temperature is, depending on which research you're adhering to, 28 degrees to 30 degrees Celsius, right? This has all happened in 600 million years. I'm also going to mention 3 dates to all of you. If you can guess in the chat box, please do not Google, but if you can guess in the chat box, what do these 3 dates signify? Please try guessing what this means. So the first date is December 30th, 1970. Okay, I hope all of you are paying heed. Please guess only after I've recited all 3 dates. So December 30th, 1970, date 1. And there are a bunch of other dates in between. And then we come into August 18th, 2006. All right, so there's December 30th, 1970, August 18th, 2006, July 29th, 2020. It's not an exclusive, exhaustive list. There are other dates, but I'm specifying these 3 dates. I'm repeating for the convenience of everyone. That's a very good guess, Isha, but that's not it. I was expecting people to. All right. So I'll just reiterate what the 3 dates are: December 30th, 1970, August 18th, 2006, July 29th, 2020. Exactly. So what are these 3 dates? We have a couple of answers already, a couple of guesses. Anyone else wants to give this a try? All right. So Priyanshi, you're absolutely right. It is the Earth Overshoot Day. For those of us who do not know what the Earth Overshoot Day is, it is the date on which we exhaust the Earth's biocapacity for that year's utilization of resources. So if you have 100 resources to make do with for 365 days, we exhaust those 100 resources on the Earth Overshoot Day. And you can see that the Earth Overshoot Day in 1970 was on the 364th day of the calendar year, which is almost perfect. I mean, human beings are never perfect, so it's almost perfect, and that's the best we can do. But if you come closer to today, we're almost exhausting all of the 100 resources, I'm oversimplifying, within 6 to 7 months of our year. Now, technically, we're using 1.6 Earths per year in terms of our natural resources, and we've been doing that for past 3 or 4 decades. So why COP is that? That is the answer to why COP. We have been using 1.6 Earths, going on to 1.7, 1.8 Earths every year, and we do not have that sort of biocapacity left anymore. We also must be mindful of the fact that we're all very privileged to be sitting across a laptop and being connected and getting to know about these things, but climate change and environmental justice technically affects first and worst the people who've already been battered and affected by climate change. So that's where I think Jasmine's point of participation and of different sectors is very important, COP. So that's another reason why COP. I had obviously authored for OP Jindal Global University an article called The Climate Dome. Please do check it out. I've explained all of these things in detail. But I want to keep this short. I know that these are still the opening remarks and we're about 40 minutes into the discussion, but I want to tell all of you about an example that I'm going to take, and I'm going to stick with Priyanshi because she's the one who answered the question. So I'm going to take her as an example. I'm still on why COP, right? What's the logic behind COP? Conference of Parties, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. There are basically 3 conventions. We do not talk about the other 2 conventions as much, the CBD and the Convention on Desertification. UNFCCC is the 3rd one, but other 2 are equally important. Let me come back to the example. Now, Priyanshi, if you could just specify your city, please. I need it for this example. Which city are you joining us from? So in the meanwhile, let me explain the situation to you. Priyanshi is from New Delhi, all right? And there's an exact clone of Priyanshi. Let's call her Priyanshi ABC, who was born and brought up in Jasmine's neighborhood somewhere in London, okay? Now, Priyanshi ABC and Priyanshi Bharadwaj from New Delhi are exactly the same for all purposes. So intellectually, educationally, they have the same background. Professionally, they're as prudent. Family-wise, financials, everything is exactly the same. So they're basically clones of each other, mirror images. Priyanshi Bharadwaj on 8th of January falls sick, right? And Priyanshi ABC in London falls sick on the 8th of January. Now, on the 8th of January, both of them fall sick. They have the same illness. Priyanshi ABC, on account of living in a city that has better public health infrastructure, which has the NHS for various other reasons, gets better in 3 days, and Priyanshi Bharadwaj from New Delhi takes about 7 days to get better, right? Now, did Priyanshi ABC do anything in her lifetime, in her short lifetime, to earn the living privilege of a better standard on account of what she has done? No, the reason why there's better public health, better doctors, better NHS in London is because London is a developed city, a part of a developed nation, a part of global north. And why is it a part of global north? Because at least secondarily or tertiarily, UK has, or global north generally has polluted and exploited, and there has been industrial revolution on account of which they have now the finances, because of which they can have better public health infrastructure and infrastructure generally, and facilities and so on and so forth. Now the question is, axiologically, on the basis of values, should Priyanshi ABC get better sooner than Priyanshi Bharadwaj of New Delhi, only on account of what the nation has done in the past, especially in the case of nation having polluted for 300 odd years? So should Priyanshi ABC get better sooner? Should she have better facilities only because her homeland has been polluting for 300 years? How can someone benefit from the wrongs of the past? And that's where the conversation is at COP. So the concept is, in 1992, under Principle 7, CBDR, all of us know, Common but Differentiated Responsibility, the developed world sort of agreed that we understand that we have caused climate change and we're heading towards an environmental disaster. Let's try and help the global south. Now, there are 2 views about this, and this is the point of environmental diplomacy. As Jasmine would tell you, these are the conversations that happen at COP, and so would Dr. Saxena and Gayatri. There's a communitarian view. You know, people like Edmund Burke, Eric Neumayer, all of those folks say that Priyanshi ABC should not have better resources. No one should be a free rider on account of the pollution that has been historically caused by her country, so on and so forth. And that's a fair point to some. Why should anyone free ride? Why should anyone have a better standard of living? Because 300 years earlier, her ancestors had polluted and now they have the resources. But there's a opposite view as well. And that opposite view comes from, Professor Simon Caney of Oxford and otherwise, which says that Priyanshi ABC had absolutely no control over the actions of her ancestors, right? She did not force their hand into polluting, exploiting environment, having resources in plenty. And hence, how can you hold her responsible when she had no say in those actions of her ancestors of environmental pollution and exploitation? So these are the two views that are always at loggerheads. The communitarian view, which says that no, Priyanshi ABC should be held responsible and she should pay Priyanshi Bharadwaj in New Delhi as reparation for what has been done to the environment. And the other view says that, look, Priyanshi ABC barely knows the name of her great-great-great-great-grandfather. How can you hold her accountable for the acts that he committed against environment towards environmental exploitation? Now, this is as simply as I could explain the concept behind COP, but that's the conversation that happens at COP. So the developing world, like with citizens such as Priyanshi Bharadwaj, say that how can you restrict me from polluting when it is you who has polluted over the past 350 years? And the developed world says that, listen, all of us are in this together. If you keep on polluting, there would be no tomorrow. So you better, sort out your act and cut your emissions now. And you could argue from both sides, to be honest. I know that we are a conscious youth and we understand that, no, we need to do more and there has to be this and there has to be that. And why aren't we having more standards? And why do we not have STPs and waste to energy plants in every colony in India? But the fact of the matter is that everyone has different priorities. And unfortunately, the political memory is usually 4 years and 364 days. So that's all that they usually look towards. And I'm not criticizing per se, but that's human nature, and that's how our governments and our businesses and everything else works. So that's why and what COP. I hope that I can contribute more to this discussion as we go ahead. And I know that I've taken too much of our time, but thank you, Shalini and Srishti, for the wonderful questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for those thoughtful words. I am sure that each one of us, we're going to take something from Mr. Chaturvedi's just response over here. And thank you so much for also throwing in a dash of optimism, which was very much needed. Thank you so much, Mr. Chaturvedi. I have a specific question, which I'm going to take it to Ms. Mehta over here. And it's very important for us to really discuss and ponder over the public-private partnerships that took place in the whole current transition to net zero goals. Now, net zero goals can also be understood as carbon neutrality, which basically means that a country's emissions are compensated by absorption and removal of greenhouse gases. Absorption of emissions can be increased by creating more carbon sinks, such as forests, while removal of gases from the atmosphere, they require futuristic technologies such as carbon storage. And in order for these major shifts to take place, large public support and participation from the private stakeholders are required. And now, since Ms. Mehta was already there representing and since she comes from such a vast private sector, I'm sure that she has some wonderful points to add to this. So, Ms. Mehta, over to you. How do you review this situation out here?
I think that's a great question. And also one that is quite important while we're looking to kind of build climate resiliency. When you come to think about it, each stakeholder has a very specific role to play in the remit of tackling climate change. And typically the public-private sector partnership, and even without partnerships, even in their specific roles, are mainly designed to actually action climate policy. and of course operate within the realms of the policy dictated and designed by governments. And this, of course, is the setup that is observed in most democratic countries. And again, as part of that, we've seen a significant interest and rise in investments and financing linked to such private-public partnerships. Again, capturing the entire remit of, I'd say, the sectors that are used or designed to tackle climate change, whether we look again at deforestation, whether we look at essentially carbon capture, sequestration. But I think the new kind of the new tool in that remit, or I'd say market mechanism in that remit, has been carbon credits. And one of the very successful takeaways from Glasgow has been the fact that there has been a lot of agreement and commitment to designing mechanisms within the climate carbon or the carbon credit remit that of course deals with a lot of transparency. When we look at, again, potential challenges around double counting of carbon credits and kind of building up that sort of trading mechanism more globally to be able to account for and validate a lot of the credit exchanges that take place, again, operating within the realms of those public-private partnerships. And those could, again, backed by international financing and specifically the GFANs or the Glasgow financing, network. Again, specifically looks at a lot of sectors, but even within that, I think the more important point here is that Glasgow has established some serious commitment with $130 trillion of private finance to be able to support these sort of public-private partnerships. And that is a big number. And, kind of coming from that space, there's a lot of work to be done to figure out, how does aligning to, a phase down sort of theme, if you will, fit in. But the core of it alludes to the point that Ishan was trying to make around a theme or a major thematic trend in investments that is linked to intergenerational challenges, right? And while it is of course work in progress at a high level, the nuances are still being fleshed out. There is a lot of support, and countries or sovereigns are basically building out very strong policies in support of that. Take the European Union, for example. It's pretty much the leader as a within the international relations remit, you'd call it as a middle power. It's kind of being the leader in the space of climate action, to be not just using the carrot approach where you have government subsidies, but you also have a lot of taxing. When you look at potential taxes around carbon taxes, and one that is again implemented as part of foreign policy. So you see significant alignment in domestic and foreign policy, and so the UK has also been playing catch up in that equation. And now, of course, with the US kind of returning to COP and specifically the Paris Aligned Treaty as sort of re-signing it, has started to make some progress. And within again that public. The public-private partnership, when you again look at the US here, they started to kind of increase their investments when we've been talking about the $100 billion mark as the investments that the developing countries need to receive from developed countries as part of the overall adaptation finance mechanisms. The US is now contributing to about 11 billion of that, and some will argue that that is quite low in terms of proportioning it to its historic emissions. But the idea is that there's been some progress, and there's definitely room for a whole lot more. So I'll pause there.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Mehta, for that. We'll be coming back to you later to discuss on a few more points. And before that, I think now that we've heard Ms. Mehta talk about the crucial role that the private sector plays in this movement, and to now understand the whole role of the government, we would invite Dr. Vivek Saxena now. My question to you, sir, is this: one of the main agendas to be fulfilled at the COP26 was to work and then collectively rise together to the whole challenges of climate change and accelerate the whole collaboration between governments, businesses, and the civil societies. Now, the question is this: where does this change come from? Does it come from the government policies, or is it some behavioral / lifestyle changes that we're going to expect? And or is it going to be individuals who are going to voluntarily change the way we act? How do you weigh all of this over here? Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very, very relevant question. So basically the challenge is a mix of both, because if you see the governments, civil society organizations, and the corporates, they all have to play very, very important roles in their domain. Civil society organizations, they have to sensitize people, create awareness, and facilitate the various type of actions which are required, the triggering of those actions for making people serious about the climate change issues. Similarly, if you see the corporates of late now, they also have to think about the sustainability, how to integrate sustainability concerns into the business practices. Because if the corporates are sensitized that their business cycles and the value chains, they are all dependent on the basically resource. And these resources are finite, they are not infinite. So if the corporates, they think about that they are going to earn all the profits presently, but in future, suppose in the value chain entire, if any of the product in that value chain, if it becomes, see, if take the example of some sort of a species of wild species or plant species, if that is one of the important gradient and suddenly it's get nearly extinct and it's very rarely available, then their product cycle is all dependent on one of the ingredient. Then from where they will meet all this? It means that their business can get disrupted. So this was just a small example. So they have to think about the biodiversity conservation, because while having the resource use, they also have to ensure that how to adopt the circular economy approach, so that the end use also, it is not going to degrade further the environment and does not hamper the ecosystem services. Here the role of sustaining of the ecosystem services come very important. Again, take the example of the mining issues. As we know that at the same time, all this mining related extraction, these minerals, metals, they are very, very important also for the development purpose. But at the same time, all these important mines, they are available mainly. All these minerals are sourced from the natural areas, which are very rich in forest, because over the period of time, the forests have played an important role, and underneath the soil has undergone such true changes that provided the, you can say, right type of ambient facility, so that it could generate and have the storage of such type of mineral. So that, but at the same time, you extract it, and you extract it without consideration of the restoration initiative. So certainly, again, there is always a possibility of disruption in the value chain. Apart from this, when you also do all these excessive things, there will always be a threat that you will be encroaching about the species rights and their habitat, and more human and species interaction that will lead further to the possibility or potential such type of zoonotic crisis or the pandemics, which can disrupt the entire world at a standstill. Again, we are witnessing like this, so that those business cycles, those economies, they all come to a standstill. Now, coming to the government side, the government also has to play very important through the policy roles and the facilitators, so that the corporates and the civil society organizations, they play a very important role, and through the interface with the government also, and the right type of policies, the right type of regulations that ensure that environment protection and the minimization of the resource degradation and all this. So that is very, very important. So as you rightly asked, that of late, you see the sensitization, the governments are also playing very important role, the national level commitments, that the international forum, every government, in spite of whatever are the domestic issues and all, they all agree collectively together to take action for the addressing the climate change challenges. And at the domestic level, accordingly, the rules, regulations, and the policies, they are guided by those international conventions and practices. Similarly, the corporates also, if you see our Company Act also, that there has been a mandatory provision under the Section 35 of the Company Act that you have with a certain amount of whenever turnover, the profit or like that, you have to mandatorily channelize your resources up to certain percentage of 2% of the net profit for the various type of CSR activities, and with which the sustainability is also one of the very, very important factor. So again, the thing is, all these funds, again, we see that they have to be rightly channelized also. Because if somebody start doing anything, then every corporate start doing anything because that is the fashion at that particular period of time. So although the proper planning, also proper utilization of the CSR funds is also very, very important. Similarly, support of civil service society organizations or non-governmental organizations, because they can freely interact with the various type of strata of the society, educating them and supporting them through various type of practices, maybe the sustainable consumption, the waste management, how to have the good practices for the water conservation. So all these are very, very, the three institutions which you just mentioned, they have a very, very important role. And I am happy that of late, at least they are starting and trying to do all these roles related to the climate action. But more and more renewed action is required. What again, I will say that whatever we talk and whatever we do it in practice at the ground, and what we realize, that is the real challenge, that what we talk and at the same time we ensure that that has been realized, so that it stands true not only for the our government at the government level, that is also true for the global collective commitments which we every year do during the COP and pledge various types of things. But again, when we review it, we find that in terms of the technology transfer, especially to the developing countries, they have not met their commitments. They have not met their commitments in terms of the commitment toward the adaptation fund, or you can say the $100 billion per year, which was supposed to be commitment for every year after the, I think, 2008 Copenhagen COP. But still, when we see that we have not getting that money again, they have at the Glasgow, they have realized that they have committed, but what we get and how these projects are implemented, that will be, again, we have to see that the present decade, which is also the decade of restoration, and we have also realized that the biodiversity loss has been to the tremendous extent. But in this decade, how much we are really serious and how much we really achieve. So that will be the real, you can say, achievement if we are able to translate all our words into the practice and achievement at the grassroots level.
Thank you so much for that answer, Mr. Saxena. Before we proceed, I would like to just, yes, sorry, Professor Ishan, please.
Shalini, thank you. I just had a very small point. I think what Dr. Saxena mentioned is of utmost importance. It's not talked about very often. It reminded me of a conversation that I was having with Justice Brian Preston of Australia. And he is a mentor at the GPODS Fellowship. I'll ask someone to share the link of the GPODS Fellowship as well. You can check it out yourself. But he has given birth to one of the most landmark judgments in mining versus environmental conservation versus corporate commitments and that sort of a thing. And he had, in that conversation, he mentioned to me that when this case was going on, one of the arguments that the mining company raised, and I'm sure the law students here would appreciate, one of the arguments that the mining companies raised was that if you do not allow me to mine here, in Australia, the demand will still exist. So I will just move to an India or an Indonesia or any other country that has that basic mining ore, and I will mine this ore there, right? So you stopping me does not mean that I won't mine at all. It'll just happen elsewhere. Now, would you want me to mine this metal in Australia, where you know that the environment impact assessment is done well and all the environmental laws work well? Or would you want me to do it in another country where there could be a lot of difference between what is written in the law and what is being executed on the ground? And that is why you need to also be considerate about how corporates and private sector thinks. Ultimately, it's driven by profit. What is required is soft compliances that help them move towards a more greener approach than just saying that, if you disallow me to mine in XYZ country, I'll just move to country ABC, which is one of the most rhetorical problems of international environmental law, which is called an international environmental leakage. But yes, so I just wanted to point out through that example that I had, the conversation that I had with Justice Preston about exactly what Dr. Saxena was mentioning there. So anyway, back to you, Shalini.
Thank you so much, Professor. But yeah, before we sort of move ahead, I would just like to let our audience and participants know that you can feel free to send in your questions now, and we will start taking them up soon. So yeah, and just moving on, Ms. Gayatri, this is a question for you. Given the increasing youth participation, as you also sort of rightly pointed out at COP itself, my question to you is with regards to in terms of sensitization and youth sensitization in particular, what can be done to inculcate values among the youth that encourage and motivate them to participate and in the fight for climate action and climate justice, right? Especially in the context of COP, these COP negotiations and discussions are these far-reaching global discussions that are happening that we at the ground level do not really have any influence over at least right now, and do not really feel the outcomes or ripple effects of the outcomes. So are these negotiations in a way just empty sort of promises that are attempting to reduce our anxieties and uprising? And so how do we as youth organizations and individuals sort of navigate through these complex questions in terms of climate change?
That's a beautiful question. In fact, I was, before I answer your question, I'd like to say something. I mean, this is like when I was teaching many, many years back. At that point, we used to keep having this conversation about what is development. It all starts with that. We all want to have the cake and eat it too. We are looking at how can we still live the way we live? How can we still enjoy everything that we want to enjoy? We don't want to reduce anything, right? So we are finding out ways and means of how I can satisfy that, and also, maybe a little bit take care of the environment in the side. To me, this is an issue. You can have in fact, I think I had this conversation with Ishan at some point in time. Fritjof Capra's book, got me really motivated many, many years back. I used to be such a crazy person. I used to keep following whatever that he was writing. He said one thing, and I keep remembering that. All your problems today, whether be it social or be it economic, be it psychological, be it whatever, they all stem from the same thing, right? It all stems from our worldview. How do we view the world? What do we want from the world? How do I want the country to be? How do I want the world to be? So here we are fighting, to take a conversation even before, like you were talking, when Ishan was beautifully explaining about what and why, etc., of COP, etc. It's the same thing. I want to be New York, okay? In Delhi, I want to have those beautiful streets and all of that. So I am screaming at the COP to say, I too have the right to look like you, behave like you, live like you. You did all of that and you polluted. Now it's my chance. And then the same thing that he was saying, and where they're saying that, well, if it is going to be your chance, then the world is going to come down. And these are the conversations that we are having. It all comes from one thing. There is a need for a paradigm change for everybody. And I strongly believe that whether be it youth or be it business or anybody, they cannot be turned around if that critical mass of people, and that mass of people, in my opinion, should come from youth, because with a large population, they should then turn this around. The day we make it a fashion that I'm happy living in a village, I'm happy living the way I am, I don't have to be necessarily like them, then this whole conversation, and they also realize I can be like this without having, so many benefits that I have sitting in New York or sitting in London. We all want that. It all comes from, I want to live like that. I want to have this kind of a 3-4 bedroom thing, and I want to have this and I want to have that. And so, but then I cannot afford to emit carbon. So what do I do? Okay, let's talk about public-private partnership. Let's talk about business. Let's talk about government. Let's talk about, so you need to do, okay, scientists, can you come up with a carbon sequestration process? Can you come up with a CCS, carbon capture storage? Can you come up with all of that? We want to come up with all of that. Why? Simply because we want to continue the way we want to. And I want to have it all. But there is one thing. You remember when we used to talk about sustainable development, you used to have that Venn diagram where you had the 3 circles of equal sizes, one here, and one here. And the midpoint is where you were talking, hey, this is sustainability. Then you started saying, no, you've got that bigger round, bigger circle, which is the environment, and your society and your economy comes within that. And that particular diagram really affects me because we just have one planet. We just have one Earth. And the way that things are going, we really don't have that option of time. We really have to turn this around. We really have to think differently and change our worldview of what do we want the world to be? How do we want the world to be? And we used to, I remember when we used to talk, the word sustainability. What does it mean? The ability to sustain. Sustain what? Sustain what I love, right? What do I love? The malls? All those shops? All those stuff? Is that what I love? Or, I love the forest and I love the plant, but I don't love it strong enough to keep it with me. You see, at the end of the day, because I used to play this game with all the students that I used to do, I used to give them a whole lot of image for them to recognize. I had these very common birds that would be there in their locality. I had these common plants that would be there in their locality. And I had these the logos of the big company. Believe me, 70, 80% of the audience, even 90% of the audience would get all the logos right. But there were barely 20% or 30% who got the birds right or the plant right, which they're watching every day outside their homes, right? And we here talk about, we need to conserve that, we need to do this, we need to protect our biodiversity, we need to do all of that. The day we can turn this around is when we feel from our heart that this is something that we want to protect. And I think enough, you're asking me your question now, coming back to the question, is it all going to be just a lot of noise or it's just big sound because this is what we want to hear in the COP? But you know what? There are 2 ways to look at it. You hear what you want to hear, right? If I don't want to hear that, then they will have to change the narrative. Whether be it business, whether be it government, whether be it, they will have to change the narrative if that is not what that critical number or critical mass of people wanting. I don't want it. But that's where we are at the crossroad. I can see all of these kinds of things, and then am I ecologically, is my ecological footprint less? Unfortunately, no. Unfortunately, no. I am trying my level best. I am in the field of environment education. We've been in the whole field of environment, and yet when something nice and flashy comes in front of me, I get tempted. So that's where I think this is an existential kind of a thing, where we need to examine ourselves and look at, hey, can I live with this? Can I not live with this? Can I use this? Can I not use this? The day when young people make it a fashion to just have those very, I'm going to have this. I'm not aspiring to have this big car, this thing, big SUV, and I'm happy with this. The day you start doing that, SUV will stop producing because there won't be takers. We ask for all of these things, and when they are now, the way they are trying to do is let me produce all of that thing and find out a way and means of producing something which is not so polluting, not so bad on the environment, but we still want to have all of that. And that's where, how do we navigate this? How do we navigate this? And I think it can be done. There are enough examples. We keep talking of nature as a teacher. And we use all these phrases, but do we really take nature as a teacher? And that's where, because examples are there, it can be done. We can have more with less. We can definitely have more with less, but are we prepared to look at that is the point. So I don't know if I'm actually getting to where you want me to answer the question, but because there were so many conversations that were coming on, so I just get a little bit emotional about it. So I keep wondering what's going to happen if we don't change the way we think. You guys can make it all fashionable, believe me. But just having 2 sets of clothes. But are you ready to have that? Is the point, right? In fact, I hold our generation really responsible. I feel so guilty because I really feel somewhere along the line, we did it all wrong. And we are asking you to shoulder the burden, which is not right, which is just not right. And so, except for saying my deepest apologies, and I'm trying to do whatever I can, but as I said, really, really very, very sorry for what we've done to you. There you are.
Gayatri, I'd like to, Shalini, with your permission, I just want to add a couple of points here. First of all, that is extremely moving, Gayatri. And for our audiences, what Gayatri is saying is actually absolutely right, because I think 85% of all carbon emissions that have contributed to today's climate disaster have come after the World War II, and 50% of them have been in the last 35 years. So there's some semblance of reasonability in blaming 2 or 3 generations that have come before us. But I just wanted to, again, I'm sticking to my New Year resolution, giving all of you hope. And I just want to point out one little factoid here. Sometimes when you do not have a plan, but you have the idea or the willingness to work towards a cause that you believe in, such as climate action, it is okay to do whatever you can. You know, it's all right if stars do not align for you and your startup does not become a unicorn which is dealing with climate tech. It's okay. And one example that I have given way too many times in my life, but when in 1916 Einstein, hypothesized that spontaneous emission, stimulated emission, absorption are all parts of the process of coming up with the spectral line, and this whole concept of light amplification by stimulated emission of particle radiation came about. In 1916, he had no idea that his concept of light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation, now which is being called laser, a century later will be used to scan QR codes in queues for movie halls and supermarkets and all of those things. For him, it was just a theory, and he believed in it. He thought that stimulated emission can cause radiation and so on and so forth. But that little concept, which was insignificant in 1916, today is scanning barcodes for us at a shop. So as long as you have a concept that you believe in and you work towards, you never know how it might snowball into something a lot bigger, and that will change the world. So stick to whatever little idea you might have, because it might be little for you, but for the world, it might turn out to be, scanning QR codes from that light amplification stimulated emission radiation. Yes, that was my 2 cents. I was just trying to give you hope and encourage all of you to keep thinking on innovative techniques to come up with climate action. Shalini, over to you.
Yeah, I think Jasmine has
yeah.
something to add. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think just quite jumping on to Ishan's sort of thought chain here. I think ingenuity is something that is crucial in this entire equation. In China, and that's what they've been doing so far, for the very right reasons. That you've been kind of deprived of the opportunity to necessarily incur industrialization through these emissions. You're basically paying the price for something that you haven't even really reaped benefits of, or you.
I think
technology.
Jasmine,
And I think we had a question in the chat box around.
go ahead, Jasmine. You were stuck.
Sorry, can you hear me
Yeah.
or not?
Go ahead. Go ahead. We can hear you, Jasmine. Go ahead. All right. I think let's come back to Jasmine. Do we want to take up the questions? I think that's what Jasmine was also doing from the chat box.
Yeah, so we have a question which is open to all the panelists. So Aloka has asked if, as a follow-up question on changing the narrative, if the panelists feel that there is a political space for a party like Greenpeace in India. We would like to open it to the panel. Anybody who's interested.
Yeah, I don't mind answering this. So,
sorry, can you?
Hi. Yeah, we can hear you now,
Hi,
Jasmine.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Go
It's
ahead.
20. Still have internet disruptions. No, sorry. I was literally just about to make the remark that I think there could be an assumption, and India's possibly right in kind of pointing out that it's kind of paying the price for the industrialization it is still undergoing, and really hasn't reaped the benefits of what, for example, the West may have had. But that being said, is sort of this new trend and really the availability of a lot more options. I think India has the possibility and sort of a unique chance, if you will, to reap through benefits of clean industrialization. Again, ISA has a big role to play there. And I think that was one of the comments in the chat box as a sort of means of gathering and kind of bringing in more, efficient and clean power to support that growth and socioeconomic development, which of course should not be compromised by any means. And I think that kind of hones in the element of public-private partnerships, which is again quite successful in a lot of countries. Of course, not endorsing one over the other, but every stakeholder, be it a state actor or non-state actor, has a very, very crucial role to play in this, and one that they can actually carve out for themselves. Right at this point, given the fact that there are no defined I would say strictly defined, roles. I think that it's an open slate, and we're seeing a lot of ingenuity emerge as a result of this. So, be it innovation in terms of your typical, carbon capture or sequestration or storage techniques, or just waste management. Really, in every possible remit to create a circular economy. So, I mean, there's definitely a lot of hope, but there's also a lot of work and revenue generation that can be done through the alternatives that we see. It's really a new wave, and I don't think that emerging markets are by any means deprived of this opportunity. You just have to hop onto the bus. That's it.
Great. Thank you so much, Ms. Jasmine. Yes, Professor Ishan.
Yeah, I was just answering the question that came up from Aloka. Aloka, again, it's a brilliant question. I hope that the folks in this room are making note of that question, because we hope and expect that something comes through from you. I just have a couple of observations in this, and thanks to Jasmine, I got to think about this a little more while she was speaking. One thing is that over the past 3 decades or so, we have noticed that political inclinations are almost globally cyclical. So we've had the rise of nationalism. We've seen the rise of right wing across the globe. And now, funnily enough, last month or a couple of months back, I think, Norway elected a new parliament. And the reason, the point of the crux of that appointment was the climate change argument that was being raised by the political party. And now we're seeing that in Chile, which is one of the biggest mining nations of the world. We do not think of Chile often, but Chile is the richest country in South America and one of the forces to reckon with when it comes to the mining industry, has appointed a left socialist sort of a president, and he is very, very sure that he wants to, increase the taxes on mining industry. So there's this what we are seeing is the start of a green wave going around. I do not know if it's sort of reached the developing world as much as we would like to, but if it's any indication, history is any indication, this is the start of a trend that will come through across the globe. Now, does that mean that existing political intellect develops a more environmental friendly attitude, or if it means that de novo new parties would come through and they would have a more green outlook towards management and governance? That's something that is to be seen, but I think that is a trend that's waiting to happen, and I'm sure in a couple of years or a couple of decades, depending on how active all of you guys are, we'll see that change coming through.
Thank you, Professor Ishan. Mr. Saxena, if you could also provide your sort of reflections and perspectives on Alika's question about whether there is political space for a party like Greenpeace in India, I think that would also be really insightful.
The issue is political space for the Greenpeace. The thing is, I think with the changing times, even the existing parties, now you see that when we talk of various pollution issues and other issues, so certainly they also have to include in their agenda. And to that extent, as long as the issues are serious and the party wants to really address all those green issues, so certainly there is to that extent, there can be political space, because when you see that the cleaning of the river Ganga, that is one of the mission. So that itself, when the people realize that all these efforts are going to have larger impact on their own survival and sustainability, then you improve the cities, you make the cities green, you make the plantation campaign, afforestation campaign, and that is the motive. Then certainly these issues with all those pressures, they are finding place in the agenda of the respective parties also. But I think still a lot need to be integrated in such type of agenda. So to that extent, I think certainly at the international level, when all these nations and the governments, they meet, they talk and discuss, and that is reflected into national level policies, and also at the grassroots level, we also realize that these are very, very important issues, and they can also be certainly part of the future whenever the parties go to the people for getting elected, and this can certainly be one of the very, very important factor to be integrated into their, can say, agenda and campaign.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Saxena. I completely agree with Dr. Saxena's views. I just wanted to also specify that it is not about one particular entity running the country. It's about the thought of being sensitized towards climate and environment as a general population, and as political parties or governance structures. And I think and in that respect, again, I completely agree with Dr. Saxena. I also think that, Srishti, we're quite short in time. I don't think we have the time to include another question here, but maybe we can have another conversation sometime soon. And I know that it'll be very difficult to have the kind of panelists that we have again to come into the same virtual space. They're very busy folks, but let's try and have another conversation soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this really stimulating session that we had. It seemed like a mini COP session to me itself, considering we came from different backgrounds and experiences, and it seemed like a whole lot of stakeholder diversity at mini COP out here. So thank you so much for that. I happen to see that Shalini has unfortunately dropped off, but on behalf of the teams of the Final Stand and of GPODS, I would like to thank this esteemed panel of panelists in this panel discussion for your wonderful thoughts out here. Thank you so much for really enriching us with these wonderful thoughts that you shared over here. Thank you so much for empowering us with those powerful words as well that you shared with us. So thank you so much.
I think Shalini is back, Srishti.
I'm just going to take a look at that. But
Hi.
yeah.
My internet just dropped. My Wi-Fi went out. So I'm hoping my hotspot can sustain until this session ends. But yes.
Thank you so much for the audience as well, to the audience, to keep this a really engaging session with your wonderful thoughts and questions. And Shalini, over to you. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Shalini, for your thorough cooperation over here. I mean, we've finally made this happen in a wonderful way. Thank you so much to the entire team as well. And over to you.
So I think Shalini is still having some internet issues. I don't know if Nanki, you'd like to do the vote of thanks, or if it's okay if we can just end it here. All right, let me check with, if you could check with, all right, I think that's it. Let's not keep our panelists waiting any longer. Thank you guys, and thank you Srishti, thank you Nanki, thank you Shalini for organizing. And again, Dr. Saxena, it's always a pleasure to hear your thoughts. And Gayatri again, Jasmine, thank you for taking out the time. I know it's still midday for you, so I hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you all for joining in. I hope these conversations continue. Again, thank you, and we will keep on continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Ishan, Srishti, Jasmine, Gayatri, and all others, and entire your back-end team who are not visible. Really very interesting discussion, and it was really very good.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Saxena, and thank you, Jasmine. It was wonderful hearing you, and also Ishan and Srishti. Yes, right in front of me. So, and Shalini and everybody who has arranged all this. And I wish you all the best and hope you keep continuing doing what you do. Thank you
so much. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.